We first heard about Loki way back during the Whole Cake Island arc when Big Mom ranted about how her daughter Lola ruined a marriage alliance that could have given her the power to take down both Whitebeard and Kaido. The Prince of Elbaph, she claimed, had fallen in love with Lola at first sight, and Big Mom's daughter ended up running. That brief mention planted a seed that Oda has now fully grown into one of the most complex antagonists turned allies that we've encountered in the series. When the Elbaph arc started, I expected Loki to be a villain. Everything that the giants said about him pointed towards him being a monster. We heard titles like the Accursed Prince, the Shame of Elbaph, someone who murdered his own father for power. Loki was chained for 6 years in the frozen underworld with sea stone binding his devil fruit abilities. With a bounty of 2.6 billion berries, which is higher than most Emperor commanders that we've seen, the giants spoke of Loki's name with fear and contempt. Children at Walrus School drew pictures of him when their teacher asked about their greatest nightmares. That's how deeply this fear ran. Loki had become the boogeyman of an entire nation. It wasn't long before Oda pulled the rug from under us because Loki, he's not the monster that everyone believed him to be. The prince we all expected to be a villain was actually the most tragic figure in this entire story arc, carrying a burden that would have destroyed anyone else. Only 10% of the people who watch these videos are subscribed to the channel, so do be sure to subscribe for the latest One Piece breakdowns. Now let's get back to the topic of the video. When Luffy first encountered Loki, he was blindfolded and bound with sea stone chains to the treasure tree Adam in the frozen wasteland of Elbaph's underworld. He immediately sensed Luffy's presence, despite being deprived of sight, demanding to know who dared to enter his domain. When Luffy introduced himself as the future Pirate King, Loki responded with equally grandiose declarations, as he stated that he was the sun god who would bring about the end of the world. Loki clearly embraced the monster that everyone believed him to be. If they wanted to call him cursed, fine, he would become the curse that destroyed everything. Standing at roughly the same size as the ancient giant Oz, Loki towers over regular giants like their children. His long magenta hair falls in twin braids at the front, while the rest remains wild and unkempt. A metallic shell covers his nose as his tongue hangs out when he speaks, and his arms bear red tattoos that mark him as something distinctly other. He's lean and long-limbed compared to typical giants, with a pointed goatee, and he has eyes unlike any other giant in existence. He has slit pupils that are set against the whites of his eyes, which are black, and features that are so alien that his mother found his eyes to be horrifying enough to attempt to murder Loki within hours of his birth. In this video, I'm aiming to break down everything that we know about the Prince of Elbaph and his legendary mythical Zoan fruit, the Ryuryu no Mi model Nidhog. We'll be covering his horrifying childhood, his connection to Rocksteady Xebec, the truth behind Harald's death, and why this devil fruit that he has might be one of the most significant powers in all of the series. Because what Oda has revealed puts Loki in direct thematic opposition to Luffy himself, the warrior god versus the sun god. Nidhogg versus Nika, and it seems as though this time, unlike centuries ago, these two devil fruit powers might finally end up working together. Loki was born 63 years before the present day in Orest Castle, not long before the winter solstice festival. His father, King Harald, was away at sea, as he often was during those years, as he was attempting to reform Elbaph from a warrior nation into one that traded peacefully with the world. His mother was Queen Estrid, a woman from the north who studied geomancy and obsessed over omens and signs. When Estrid looked at her newborn son's face, she was immediately repulsed. This was because of his eyes. They were so strange and distinctive that Estrid was horrified by them, and she completely rejected Loki on the spot, throwing her infant son into the underworld. She attempted to murder him within hours of his birth. The queen ordered the kingdom to be told that the child was stillborn. Loki survived the fall into the frozen hell of the underworld, a drop that can kill fully grown adult giants. He hit the ground, apparently killed a large bear through decapitation as a baby, and then climbed the treasure tree Adam all the way back up to the sun world. He was maybe hours old at this point. When Loki tried to crawl into his mother's bedroom afterward, desperate for any connection with the woman who gave birth to him, Estrid had guards keep him away. She ordered them to cover his eyes, as she died not long after, and her final prophecy was that Loki would kill kill Harald. Every misfortune that struck Elbaph from that point forward, including natural disasters, famines, deaths, they all got blamed on the curse of Loki. Harald eventually met his son for the first time after Estrid's funeral. Loki was just a few months old and he had already given up on love. A baby was broken by the world. Harald left Loki in the care of Estrid's older brother, who openly hated the child, calling him a horrid thing, and feeding him rotten scraps. By the time Loki turned 15, Estrid's older brother was found dead in the underworld, and nobody appeared to be surprised. Growing up, Loki directed his rage outward. When Harald was away, which was frequently given his diplomatic missions to reform Elbaph's reputation, Loki would emerge from wherever he was hiding and attack villages across Elbaph with packs of wild animals that he had befriended in the underworld. It was no surprise that the people of Elbaph saw him as a monster. Loki was in fact a boy who was so starved for connection that violence was the only language that he knew. When he was 10, Loki made the underworld his personal playground. He tamed ferocious beasts that terrified adult giants, creatures that should have killed him dozens of times over, but instead they became his companions. They were the only living beings that didn't look at him with fear or hatred. When he brought these animals to the Sun World during his rampages, the giants had confirmation that the Accursed Prince was everything that the prophecies had claimed him to be. His half-brother Hadruddin tried to stop him during one of Loki's rampages 48 years ago. The western village had just been rebuilt by Harald, and here came Loki tearing through it with his animal companions. Hadruddin rose to defend his father's work, but Loki beat him easily. Despite being 18 years younger, Loki was significantly larger thanks to his ancient giant heritage from Harald's bloodline. He mocked Hadruddin for being an illegitimate son of King Harald, as he went on to insult their father's pacifistic nature, as he was opposed to Elbaph shifting away from their warrior culture. Other children came to Hadruddin's aid here, but Loki dismissed them all as weak and overly reliant on others. Loki wasn't wrong about his physical superiority. Even as a child, he possessed strength that baffled everyone, but none of these victories gave him what he actually craved. After that particular rampage, Loki attempted to end his life. He threw himself off the edge into the underworld, mimicking exactly how his mother had tried to kill him. The fall didn't work as he landed with nothing but scratches. He was too strong to die. Right after landing, he was crying about his inability to end his own suffering. Loki then encountered a group of human pirates led by none other than Rox D. Xebec. Accompanying the legendary pirate were young Edward Newgate, Shiki, and Buckingham Stussy. These were the future monsters of the sea who at that point were still navigating the routes to Elbaph's Sun World. Rox had come looking for Harald to recruit him into his crew. He wanted the ancient giant's power for his goal of world conquest. When Loki refused to help send a message, Rox actually injured the boy with a sword strike, knowing it would force Harald to return and check on his son. Rox's plan worked. Harald came rushing back as this shocked Loki, who genuinely didn't believe that his father cared about him at all. Loki overheard the conversation between Rox and Harald. He heard Rox declare his ambition to conquer the entire world, to become king of the world itself. Something then clicked within Loki's mind. He had found a purpose. Here was someone with dreams as grand and as destructive as Loki's own rage. For the next 18 years, Loki idolized Rox and followed his exploits obsessively via newspapers and word of mouth. Every time Rox came to Elbaph over those years to recruit Harald, Loki begged to join his crew, but Rox refused every single time. When Loki challenged him to a fight to prove himself worthy, Rox brutalized him without hesitation or mercy. It didn't matter because Loki kept coming back. One time the royal guards had to save Loki from drowning after he tried setting out to sea on his own to chase after Rox. Another time, Loki even told Rox that he thought he was the pirate Nika, the sun god who would bring about the end of the world that the Harley text prophesied. That's how much Loki believed in Rox. Rox then revealed to Loki during one of their conversations that he was seeking Harald to lead the legendary Galila band, giant warrior shipwrights who had been captured somewhere. Loki absorbed every piece of information about Rox's grand plans, dreaming of the day that he could finally be a part of it. Then, 40 years ago, Loki watched as Harald got into a violent fight with Rox. Their friendship severed completely over irreconcilable differences. For the next 2 years, Loki continued following Rox's exploits through newspapers while waiting for the pirate to return to Elbaph, but he never did. And 38 years ago, Loki read the news about Rox's demise on God Valley and he wept openly. The only person who had given his existence meaning was now gone forever. There is a parallel storyline that runs through Loki's youth that completely recontextualizes who he is. Hadrudine's mother Ida wasn't from Elbaph, she was an outsider who had opened a bar down in the underworld's coastal region. Despite Loki's hostility towards her, he insulted her outsider status, accused her of trying to replace Estrid as queen, as Ida consistently showed him kindness. She knew that he was lonely. She told him that he was always welcome to live with her and Hadrudine. Loki rejected this offer repeatedly, but over time he started spending more and more time at Ida's bar. His perception of her softened, though he refused to show it openly. When Ida fell ill, Loki delivered a bull to her, claiming that he just wanted the bar to stay open so he had somewhere to hang out. One of Ida's attendants recognized this for what it was. This was love from Loki, who had never learned how to express it properly. It wasn't long before Loki discovered the truth. The people from Brewer's village, Estrid's hometown, his birth mother's relatives, they had poisoned Ida. They had assumed that Loki would approve because eliminating Ida would secure their position in any inheritance disputes, as they were family after all. Loki's response was immediate and violent. He burned Brewer's village to the ground as he strangled one of his own relatives, screaming, "Ida ain't gonna die, is she? Because she's the only mother I have." Loki openly declared for the first time his love for someone. It wasn't his birth mother Estrid who would try to murder him, but instead Ida, the foreign giantess who showed him kindness when no one else would. Loki was imprisoned for destroying the village, and Ida died while he was locked up as he mourned her in silence. Then 14 years before the present day, everything changed. King Harald had been caught in IMU's trap. During his attempts to integrate Elbaph into the world stage, Harald had been recruited as a candidate for the God Knights after Shanks went missing before his promotion. The five elders took Harald to the empty throne room where he met IMU directly. They bestowed upon him the Depths Covenant, an upgrade from his existing Shallows Covenant, which granted both immortality and enhanced power. IMU then gave Harald an order to return to Elbaph, create an abyss portal, and then transform the nation into a country of warriors. IMU's plan was to create a giant army for the navy. Harald refused this. He was okay with giants voluntarily joining the army, but he was against forcing his people into servitude. This is when IMU revealed the catch. The Depths Covenant meant that Harald couldn't disobey. His body began moving against his will, as his thoughts began to change. The world government never wanted Elbaph as an ally, they instead wanted slaves. Harald ordered his own guards to chain him to a pillar, as he summoned Loki and Jarl. When they arrived at Orest Castle, they found Harald impaling his own soldiers. His body was under IMU's control. He was begging them both to kill him before he slaughtered everyone, but his wounds kept healing. The Covenant's immortality had fully activated within Harald. King Harald told Loki to eat the legendary devil fruit that had been passed down through Elbaph's royal family. It was the only power capable of killing him now. He wanted Loki to end his suffering and then tell the people what really happened. Then Harald's personality completely flipped. IMU's corruption took full hold as he massacred the surrounding gods and declared himself a vessel for the Great One. He stabbed Jarl through the head with a sword that he once gifted the old warrior, remarking that he could have it back now. Somehow Jarl survived the attack. Loki ran for the treasure room where the devil fruit was kept as Shanks and Skoppagaban arrived to help hold Harald back, but Harald's immortality combined with his Supreme King Haki made him nearly impossible to stop. Shanks tried to reach Harald, but he was too far gone. He was intoxicated by his new immortal body, convinced of his own godhood. The legendary devil fruit of Elbaph had been guarded for centuries by Ragnir, a sentient hammer that housed the spirit of Ratotska, the ice squirrel who had once accompanied the ancient warrior god. According to Elbaph's legends, there was once a mighty warrior god who wielded Ragnir as his personal weapon, while possessing this same devil fruit. When that warrior god died, Ratotska's spirit didn't simply fade away. Instead, it somehow merged with or possessed the hammer, creating a guardian that would protect the Nidhogg fruit until a worthy successor emerged. For literal several centuries, Ragnar refused every giant who attempted to claim the fruit. It wasn't that the fruit was hidden or unknown. Elbaph's population knew about both the legendary devil fruit and the legend surrounding it, but giants had tried to eat it before, but Ragnar rejected them all. The hammer seemed to be waiting for something specific, for someone who could truly inherit the warrior god's power. When Loki reached the treasure room, Ragnar attacked immediately, as it genuinely tried to stop Loki from reaching the chest. Loki fought back with everything that he had, slamming his own hammer against the sentient weapon in a clash of Supreme King Haki. The collision was so powerful that it shattered Loki's hammer completely, but Loki kept fighting, and when Ragnar finally hit the ground and transformed into its true form, a beaten up squirrel exhausted from the battle, something extraordinary happened. Loki became the only giant in centuries to best Ragnar in combat. The ice squirrel's spirit had finally found someone that it deemed worthy. Ragnar guided Loki to the chest and watched as he consumed the fruit within. The Ryuryu no Mi model Nidhogg is a mythical Zoan type devil fruit that grants the ability to transform into a hybrid or full version of Nidhogg, a legendary dragon from Norse mythology. The devil fruit's appearance before consumption was light colored and spiky, with a handlebar stem that curved distinctively. Loki's beast form is terrifying. In this transformation, he becomes the largest dragon in the world, a massive four-legged creature with obsidian-colored scales that cover nearly his entire body. The dragon possesses enormous wings that further increase its already impossible scale. When Loki transformed for the first time in Orest Castle, his beast form took up most of the space in a structure designed for giants to live in comfortably. Loki immediately attacked Harald. His father's immortality from the Depths Covenant meant nothing against Nidhogg's power. The beast's claws tore into Harald with wounds that regenerated far slower than normal, suggesting that this devil fruit specifically counters abilities like the Covenant's healing. Skoppa Gaban later admitted that without this fruit, he couldn't have imagined how anyone could have stopped a warrior as powerful as Harald, boosted by IMU's gift. When Loki returned to his giant form and prepared to deliver the killing blow with Ragnar, Harald momentarily regained his senses. The Covenant's corruption lifted just long enough for father and son to have their final exchange. Harald expressed pride in his son. He acknowledged that Loki possessed Supreme King Haki, confirmed now as fact, not just rumor. He thanked Loki for what he did at Brewer's village, recognizing it as proof of how much his son loved Ida. He asked Loki to get along better with Hadruddin and declared that Loki had what it takes to lead Elbaph. Loki's response cut deep as he says, "I will never forgive you for making me do this." Harald then said that he loved him as Loki struck his father in the chest with Ragnar, infusing the blow with Supreme King Haki. Despite Harald's immortality, the attack shattered him to pieces completely. The power of the Nidhogg fruit combined with Loki's conqueror's Haki was sufficient to permanently kill someone enhanced by IMU's covenant. Loki didn't actually know that he was infusing his attacks with Supreme King Haki. He wouldn't learn about this ability until years later when Gaban mentioned it as the key to harming the immortal god knights. Loki understandably wept while the attack was going on and after it was done. He sat over his father's body and remarked bitterly on the fate that Harald received for simply loving his country enough to try protecting it. Following the massacre, IMU felt the backlash of Harald's death from Merijo. The world government had never intended to let Elbaph actually join them. Their history with the D-clan made the giants too dangerous to trust. The whole recruitment of Harald had been a trap to enslave the giants from the inside. The Ryuryu no Mi model Nidhogg is based off of a dragon from Norse mythology who gnaws at the roots of the world tree, and in the myths, Nidhogg represents the eventual destroyer of the world, the creature who will bring about the collapse of the world tree and trigger Ragnarok, the apocalyptic battle that ends the current age. Nidhogg is also described as a tormentor in the realm of hell, punishing the wicked by devouring them. This is similar to Loki, who was chained at the base of the treasure tree Adam. He declared his intention to destroy the world, and he's been called the one who will bring about the end of everything. Oda is mapping Norse mythology directly into Loki's character. Even for a mythical Zoan, his devil fruit is considered one of the most highly regarded devil fruits in the world. Both IMU and Rox specifically wanted this devil fruit power in order to aid their goals of global conquest. The power scaling of this devil fruit is proportional to the user's original size. Jarl explained this to Shanks and Gaban after witnessing Loki's transformation. If a human ate this fruit, they would would transform into something roughly the size of an ancient giant. A regular giant would have an even larger beast form than a human user, but only someone with actual ancient giant blood can draw out the fruit's full potential. Loki carries that ancient giant heritage through Harald's bloodline, which means that he can draw out nearly the maximum power of the fruit. When he transforms, his dragon form is estimated at hundreds of meters, so huge that he barely fits in the halls of Orest Castle. Several normal-sized giants are able to fit on his back with room to spare. Jarl stated that Loki's transformed state as a dragon is so colossal that it can blot out the sun by flying overhead. The very presence of this dragon brings darkness to the land beneath it, and we've seen this in action during the current arc. When Loki flew up to the Sun World during the God Knight's attack, his presence alongside Gear 5th Luffy triggered exactly the prophecy that Elbaph had recorded over 800 years ago. On a strange day of snow, lightning and thunder, the sky would be covered by a colossal beast, and alongside the drums of liberation, the sun god would appear. The transformation grants multiple abilities beyond raw size. Like all Zoan fruits, it provides both a hybrid form and a full beast form, though Loki has primarily been shown using the full beast transformation during combat. Loki is also able to fly with his massive wings. He possesses incredible physical strength, enough to maul through Harald's covenant-enhanced immortality, and most terrifying of all, he is able to launch concentrated blasts of lightning from his mouth. Even while weakened by sea stone chains, Loki demonstrated impressive reaction speed as he dodged one of Luffy's Gear 4th strikes at point-blank range while still bound. It's absurd that he was able to do this while being drained by sea stone. His technique, Thorheim, which literally translates to Thunderworld, demonstrates his power perfectly. In his full beast form, Loki gathers lightning inside his mouth before breathing it out as a attack beam, which explodes as a destructive ball of electricity infused with Supreme King Haki. A single blast of Thorheim pulverized multiple MMA nightmare creatures that themselves dwarfed normal giants in size. The lightning powers of Nidhogg are an addition by Oda. The mythical Nidhogg doesn't actually have lightning-based abilities, but thematically it creates a great opposition to Nika. Nidhogg is a creature clad in black, heavily associated with lightning. Nika is a figure clad in white, associated with rubber, which of course is a natural insulator against electricity. They are designed as cosmic opposites. There's also evidence that Loki possesses weather manipulation abilities, strange meteorological events that surrounded him since before he even ate the fruit. After his birth, Elbaph was struck by continuous natural disasters that only calmed after Loki blindfolded himself and moved to the underworld. When he arrived at the Sun World during the current arc, snow and lightning began falling at the same time while the entire island shook. Whether if this is an ability of the Devil Fruit or something innate to Loki himself is unclear, but the connection is undeniable. Centuries ago, there was a warrior god who wielded Ragnia and possessed the same Devil Fruit. According to Elbaph's legends, this warrior god used the Nidhogg transformation to battle the sun god Nika directly. We've seen visual representations of this ancient clash, a giant with a white beard and horned helmet facing off against a figure identical to Luffy's Gear 5th form, complete with a characteristic white silhouette, loincloth and weapons. This confirms that the conflict between Nidhogg's user and Nika predates even the Void Century. It might have occurred in what the Harley text calls the First World, before the world was broken the first time. The ancient depictions show dragons with horns formed in a specific pattern. Loki's horns curved in the opposite direction compared to these images. Some interpret this reversal as Oda signaling that this time, unlike in the past, the sun god and the warrior god will fight together rather than against each other. When the warrior god died, his companion Rototsuka didn't simply disappear. The ice squirrel spirit merged with Ragnia, creating a guardian that would protect the Nidhogg fruit until a worthy successor emerged. The hammer waited for someone who was strong enough, who had the right qualities and was capable of standing alongside Nika when the time came. Rox understood this devil fruit's significance. He sought to have Harald eat it specifically because Harald's ancient giant heritage would maximize its power. Rox believed that combining the Nidhogg fruit with certain other powers would give him the ability to kill IMU and end the celestial dragon's reign over the world. When Summers sent children plummeting to their deaths, Luffy cushioned their fall while they landed safely on Loki's back. When Loki crushed Summers beneath his claw, Luffy had just finished hitting the God Knight with a lightning-infused punch that only existed because Loki's arrival changed the weather. Both the Sun God and the Warrior God are cooperating, and Loki even acts like a tsundere about it, as he insists that he's not helping anyone, that the children landing on him was coincidence, that he's only there to destroy things, but his actions keep saving people despite his protests. Maybe this time, with Nika and Nidhogg fighting on the same side instead of opposing each other, Imu's control can actually be broken. After King Harald was killed, Loki refused to take the throne. He knew the truth would never be believed. He spent his entire life being called a monster. Why would anyone accept that he killed his father as an act of mercy? So he ordered Jarl, Gaban, and the surviving castle guards to keep the truth a secret. He took a group of loyal guards and headed out to sea, declaring his intention to avenge his father by destroying the world government. Over the next 8 years, Loki became infamous enough to earn a special bounty of 2.6 billion berries. The specifics of why it's special are unclear, but the world government considers him dangerous enough that the God Knights personally offered him a position among their ranks during the Elbaph arc. At some point during these years, Loki encountered Charlotte Lola and fell in love with her at first sight. Big Mom arranged a marriage, but Lola fled. When Big Mom tried substituting Lola's twin sister Chiffon, Loki saw through the deception immediately and refused. This rejected marriage is what Big Mom was referencing all those years ago when she claimed that marrying Loki would have given her the power to defeat Whitebeard and Kaido. After we've seen Loki's true abilities, the boasts of Big Mom don't seem so outlandish anymore. A dragon that size, capable of changing weather patterns and launching Supreme King Haki infused lightning attacks, this is Emperor level power at minimum. 6 years before the present story, Shanks captured Loki and brought him back to Elbaph. The kingdom's warriors subdued him and initially demanded execution, but Jarl argued for everyone to be more lenient on him, and Loki was instead imprisoned in the underworld, bound to the treasure tree Adam with sea stone chains that neutralized his devil fruit. Being imprisoned with sea stone for 6 years would break most devil fruit users. The chains don't just prevent transformation, as they constantly drain energy and suppress abilities. Loki endured this in the freezing darkness of the underworld, surrounded by the bones of giants and humans who had died in the wasteland. According to Loki, the underworld served as both a prison and an execution ground. Criminals were sent there to die, because the cold alone would kill most beings, and whatever the cold didn't finish, the massive predatory beasts roaming the eternal darkness would. His only companions were the giant beasts that he had befriended during his childhood, creatures that should have torn him apart but instead became loyal protectors. They defended the imprisoned Loki from anyone who might threaten him, including the very few humans who had survived in the underworld after picking fights with Elbaph's warriors. These human survivors dressed in smelly rags to avoid being eaten. They gradually became Loki's underlings out of necessity rather than loyalty. Loki had a low opinion of their strength and considered them little more than cannon fodder, which he stated right in front of them. Loki also possessed a snow dendenmushi that allowed him to communicate with someone named Mosa, a mysterious figure that he had never actually met in person, but who provided companionship to him across the isolation. During the Elbaph arc, Mosa contacted Loki to inform him that they wouldn't be able to call again for a while, thanking him for the companionship that they shared. Loki expressed genuine worry for his friend's situation. It's one of the few moments where we see him caring openly about someone. Despite being weakened by Sea Stone, Loki's endurance is phenomenal. The giants noted that even with one leg still trapped in Sea Stone, it would do little to contain his power, and Loki promptly demonstrated this by swinging his massive warhammer Ragnir without issue. When the God Knights attacked him, impaling him through the chest with 3 blades from Shamrock's Cerebrus sword, Loki somehow survived wounds that should have been instantly fatal. Gerd estimated that it would take months for his injuries to fully heal, but yet Loki recovered enough to enter combat no more than a few hours after receiving treatment and food. When Luffy stumbled across Loki's prison during the Elbaph arc, the chained prince immediately shifted into manipulation mode. He offered to destroy any pirate crew of Luffy's choosing in exchange for freedom. When that didn't work, he revealed his underlings and threatened to have them attack. When Luffy casually tamed all the giant beasts in an instant, they reminded him of his training on Rusukaina during the time skip, and Loki realized that he was dealing with someone unexpected. The mention of Shanks changed everything. One of the human survivors referenced the Emperor, and Luffy immediately immediately started demanding information. Loki saw this as an opening as he mocked Shanks as a coward, and Luffy's response was immediate. He activated Gear 4th with a devastating punch which was barely dodged by Loki. Loki quickly took back his insult and negotiated with Luffy instead. He said if he were to free him, then he would reveal Shanks' current location, and he made Luffy promise to keep their meeting a secret. Luffy agreed as Zoro went along with it despite his reservations, warning Luffy that everything Loki said was probably lies given how much the giants despised him. But Luffy's desire to find Shanks was too strong. He promised to beat Loki up if he was lying and went to retrieve the key from Orest Castle. When Luffy and Zoro returned with the key, they found Loki severely wounded. The God Knights Shamrock and Gunko had visited during their absence, offering recruitment into their order, when Loki refused, declaring that joining them would put him at the same level as the world noble scum. Gunko attacked him repeatedly with her Aro no Mi arrow constructs, while Loki still wouldn't submit and even threatened revenge. Shamrock had Cerebrus impale him through the chest. Before leaving, Loki noticed something that changed everything. Shamrock looked identical to Shanks. Shamrock revealed that they were estranged twin brothers, both members of the Figaland family as sons of Figaland Garling. Both had been born on God Valley to a red-haired woman during the native hunting competition. Shanks had returned to Merijo at one point, but ultimately rejected his birthright and chose to live in what Shamrock dismissively called the filthy lower world. Loki becoming free happened in several stages, and none of them were clean or easy. Luffy began unlocking the chains immediately upon returning with the key, but Zoro deliberately left one ankle cuff in place. He didn't fully trust Loki's intentions, and given everything that the giants had said about the prince, this caution made sense. Even partially freed, with Sea Stone still suppressing some of his power, Loki demonstrated why everyone feared him. He grabbed Ragnir, the sentient hammer that had chosen him, and he struck the treasure tree Adam directly. Lightning answered his call, igniting the southern forest and sending panic through the sun world above. Loki threatened to keep destroying until the final restraint was removed, but this was a bluff as his wounds from Cerebrus were severe enough that he collapsed moments later. But the display proved his power hadn't diminished during years of imprisonment. Gerd of the new giant warrior pirates quickly tended to Loki's injuries while Hadruddin arrived and confronted him directly. The half-brothers hadn't spoken in over a decade, and Hadruddin was consumed by grief turned rage over his father's death. Road had revealed Luffy's plan to free Loki, bringing Hadruddin rushing down to prevent it, standing over his subdued half-brother. Hadruddin became so enraged that he visibly considered killing Loki right there. Loki had spent 6 years letting everyone believe that he was a cold-blooded murderer. He hadn't ever explained himself to Elbaph, and he didn't try to clear his name or challenge the narrative that painted him as a monster. He knew they wouldn't believe the truth anyway, so why bother? But facing Hadruddin's accusations directly, something changed. Loki told his brother to consider their surroundings, as he asked if Hadruddin truly believed that he'd killed their father with murder in his heart. When Chopper reported the chaos happening above, God Knights rampaging, nightmare creatures attacking, Dory and Broggy transformed into demons by Imu's power, children being held hostage, everyone had felt the shift in pressure. Gaban, recovering from his own injuries, shared crucial information. The God Knights weren't immortal. The key to defeating them was Supreme King Haki, the one thing their covenant couldn't fully protect against. Back when the Knights kept trying to reclaim Shanks, the Roger pirates would attack them with Supreme King infused strikes until they gave up and left. Gaban told Luffy that Zoro also possessed this ability but had no idea that he could use it. Then he mentioned something that stopped Loki. The reason Loki had been able to kill Harald was because he'd unconsciously been infusing his attacks with Supreme King Haki the whole time. Loki had spent 14 years believing that Nidhogg the Fruit alone was responsible for his father's death, learning that his own latent power, which he didn't even know he had, was the actual killing force, must have hit different for him. Armed with this knowledge, Loki pointed out that he had direct experience dealing with the God Knights and their supposed immortality. He demanded to be freed so that he could help fight. Scopper Gaban, who had been there on the day Harald died, advocated for Loki based on what he witnessed. He suggested that Loki should tell Hadruddin what really happened. Despite his trauma from that day, Loki reluctantly went forward with sharing the true account of events. Once Loki shared the true version of events, Hadruddin's anger transformed. Gaban's confirmation gave the story weight, Hadruddin accepted that his brother was absolved from blame and personally unlocked the remaining chain. He apologized for doubting Loki's love for their father, though he clarified that this didn't excuse the other crimes that Loki had committed throughout his life. Right then, a Draugr MMA dropped down into the underworld, one of the nightmare creatures that Killingham was creating from the fears of children. Loki offered to warm up against it while the others took the lift. Finally free, Loki leaped into the air with Luffy on his shoulder and struck the Draugr with Ragnir, encasing it in ice with a technique called Niflheim. The ascent to the Sun World proved just how powerful Loki was. He transformed into his full Nidhogg beast form while Luffy activated Gear 5th. The two rose together through the layers of Elbaph, but disaster struck during the climb. Summer's meddling caused the children who had been held hostage to fall from the sky, doomed to plummet to their deaths, but Luffy managed to cushion their impact with Gear 5th abilities as they fortunately landed directly on Loki's massive back. Annoyed at accidentally helping others, Loki demanded that they get off him at the first possible opportunity. He'd spent his whole life being called a destroyer, and here he was rescuing kids. When they arrived at the Sun World, the entire island shook from the overwhelming combined presence of Nidhogg and Nika. Shepherd Summers, the god knight whose Iba Iba no Mi allowed him to generate invisible thorny vines, wasn't content with the mission that Imu had assigned. He wanted to kill the parents and their children for his own sick pleasure, rather than just completing the objective of capturing them from Merijo. He had spent the entire duration on Elbaph savoring the fear and desperation of the giants, literally drooling at the prospect of making them suffer. When the children volunteered to protect their parents from Summer's assault, positioning themselves as shields, Summers tried to kill them all with a barrage of thorn bullets, but Zoro intervened, repelling every projectile before they could land. Then Luffy made his move, as he grabbed a bolt of lightning directly from the storm that Loki's arrival had generated. Luffy then unleashed Gomu Gomu no Dawn Thor rifle at Summers. The attack combined Luffy's Gear 5th power with Loki's lightning in an entirely new technique, electric energy enveloping his fist as he punched with enough force to blast Summers into pieces. The God Knight's thorns that were wrapped around the children immediately disappeared. Ripley, who was watching, stated that she believed Luffy was the warrior of liberation Nika himself. Summers, who is still alive despite being scattered across the ground, screamed that Nika was nothing more than a bedtime story. Loki ended the argument by crushing Summers beneath his massive dragon claw. In the distance, Chopper and Gaban observed the battle from a position where Gaban could provide medical insight. This was the moment Gaban's mind returned to the day of Harald's death, triggering the flashback where Jarl explained the true nature of Loki's devil fruit. After dealing with Summers, Loki and Luffy left to hunt down the remaining MMA nightmares roaming the Sun World. These creatures born from children's fears via Killingham's Ryuryu no Mi model Kirin ability were rampaging across Elbaph. Using Thorheim, Loki obliterated a group of them in a single blast of lightning-infused Supreme King Haki. In Merijo, Imu became furious upon witnessing Loki's display of power. Then the realization hit. The Nidhogg fruit had been in Elbaph all along, hidden for centuries, and now someone capable of wielding its full potential had emerged. Imu's anger was telling, as it's proof that Nidhogg is a genuine threat to their 800-year-long plan. If you think about what Nidhogg represents mythologically, it's the dragon that gnaws at the roots of the world tree, the creature destined to bring about Ragnarok. If you correlate this to One Piece, Loki's power represents a direct threat to everything Imu has built. The red line wraps around the entire world, and it serves as the foundation of the world government's control. Merijo sits on top of it. The entire power structure depends on the world remaining divided by that barrier. Nidhogg is a dragon whose mythological purpose is to destroy world trees and their foundations. With Loki's size and power, destroying the red line becomes possible. He could fly directly to Merijo, his lightning could devastate entire regions, and his presence alongside Nika triggers conditions that have been prophesied to bring about world-changing events. Shanks likely captured Loki 6 years ago and kept him imprisoned for exactly exactly this reason. Not because Loki was evil, but because releasing him before Nika arrived would have let IMU capture or kill him first. Shanks knew what was coming. He was aware that Loki needed to survive until the promised day. Looking at everything we know about Loki and his Nidhogg devil fruit, Oda has constructed a character that represents the mirror opposite of Luffy. Both of them have mythical zones that shape reality around them, as well as Supreme King Haki, and they were denied something fundamental in childhood that shaped their entire personalities. Now, where Luffy had found Shanks and gained an anchor of love, Loki found rocks and gained a dream of destruction. Luffy, who found a family of crewmates who would die for him, Loki ended up pushing everyone away before they could reject him first. Now, for the first time in centuries, the warrior god's power and the sun god's power are fighting on the same side. So this is pretty much everything that we know about Loki and his devil fruit Nidhogg so far. The Elbaph arc is far from over, and I'm sure Oda has more revelations coming about this prince and his legendary power. But what's your take on Loki? Do you think that he'll become a permanent ally of the Straw Hats, or is his trajectory taking him somewhere else entirely? Let me know all of your thoughts by continuing the discussion in the comments, and lastly, thanks for making it to the end of this one, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.
A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.